oh, I should have just gone to the disability office and that would have fixed the problem. It might not have. That's the actual reality, is those professors could still deny you, unfortunately. They really could, even though they shouldn't be able to. They actually can. And so it's like, we shouldn't have to be perfect with our advocacy in order to get our needs met either. Hello and welcome to the Trauma-Informed SLP. I am Kim Neely. I am a licensed speech-language pathologist in the United States. I'm also neuroqueer, and I've had a lifelong hyperfixation with trying to figure out people, which is a little tricky for us neurodivergents. And on this channel, I examine human connection and communication through a trauma-informed lens so that hopefully we can have more understanding, compassion for each other, and we can start to heal more from all the damaging societal messages we get all the time. On today's episode, How to ADHD actually came out with a video that is happening to dovetail a lot with what I'm doing with my late diagnosed neurodivergent series that I have. I have a playlist, which I can link wherever that thing pops up. I can't tell left from right anyway, and then the camera and the flippy, I don't know. Because I've come up with this little like kind of Venn diagrammy way of thinking of neurodivergent affirming care as a speech-language pathologist, partly from my training and my experience with a variety of neurodivergence of variety like levels. And I have a whole video of unpacking that when it comes to apparent versus non-apparent, but also being a late diagnosed neurodivergent myself and learning to unpack some of the things that I've learned about myself. So in my little way of thinking of neurodivergent affirming care from a trauma-informed perspective, I ended up kind of dovetailing with self-determination, which is like a theory in mental health circles about kind of how internal motivation and external motivation both kind of combine to affect our mental health and also our actions and our behaviors in the world and the kind of values we hold and that kind of a thing, which it means that I think there are certain things we have to know about ourselves as individuals. And there's also this whole societal side of things that we have to start to understand and unpack in the hopes of creating a safer community with each other and being able to find like even just little pockets of being able to unmask around certain people and feeling safe in certain spaces, because it won't be everywhere because society is not built for us. And that's probably not going to change during our lifetimes. But maybe in the future, perhaps. Who knows? Let's stay optimistic. It's a little tricky these days. So she put out this video on Is Internalized Ableism Holding You Back? And she makes a lot of really great points. And she wants to talk about this topic more. And this is literally like kind of one of the things I'm starting to dive into on my channel too. So might as well go ahead and do a response for it. Why not? Let's give it a shot.
Hello, brains. Today I just want to talk about a topic that has come up a lot for me recently, reading through comments, talking to people with my own experiences as well, which is how much internalized ableism can get in the way of people with ADHD and other disabilities feeling proud of themselves. So let's talk about it. There's a lot of different definitions you can find on the internet, but basically what I'm talking about when I talk about internalized ableism in the context of our community, internalized ableism is the belief that typically abled people are superior and we should be like them. It's an oversimplification, but that's basically what it is.
Internalized ableism is 100% that. It is a form of internalized oppression, which I like to call it like the isms and the faux phobias, you know? So you have like ableism and racism and sexism, and you have the faux phobias being like fat phobia and homophobia and transphobia. And I call them faux phobias because, as Aubrey Gordon mentioned on the Maintenance Phase podcast once, which she's totally right about, actual phobias are actual mental health things that really shouldn't be like downplayed, you know? So I call them the faux phobias because those are still the terms we use a lot, even though they're not the best terms for it. And also anti-fatness is part of, is another ism, basically. It's an internalized oppression. So internalized ableism is a flavor of that, you know? And so, yeah, people who don't have your disability feel that they are the norm. They're the normal ones. They're the ones who are really adults, and you should try to figure out how to be like them. We should fix ourselves, basically. Heal thyself.
With internalized ableism, we are essentially discriminating against ourselves. We believe that we should be like neurotypical people and that we should function like they do, and we are bad or wrong or broken or less than if we don't.
Yeah. So it's discrimination, but I like to think it's a little more like dehumanization. That's how I tend to say it. So it is like self-discrimination, but it's more like self-dehumanization, saying like, I'm not good enough. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve to be treated well. I don't deserve this. I should be better than I am, right? It's more of that constant, like, I'm not a real adult because I can't declutter my house. It's that kind of thing, which is actually pretty dehumanizing because there you're like infantilization. That is a form of dehumanization, especially in the disability community, right? It's a form of ableism in general, but you could kind of internally infantilize yourself, right? And that's a form of dehumanization.
Things like, I should be able to do this. I shouldn't need this support. I should know better. I should have done this by now. I should know how to do this by now, right? I'm an adult. I should be able to keep my house clean. I should be able to show up on time. And it completely disregards the fact that we struggle with these things.
Yeah. So I actually just gave a guest lecture to the local university, to speech language pathology students in my local university, where I mentioned that like that's a sign of internalized depression, is any of those like, I should be this type of statements, or I'm not good enough of this. I'm not pretty enough to really be a valuable woman. I'm not black enough. I'm not gay enough. I'm not white enough. Like, it's all of that, like, you're just not enough to be representative of whatever group or whatever mix of intersectionalities you happen to have. Or I'm not queer enough. That's another really big one for some of my identities, like asexuality and agender, were way more rare. And we feel a lot of people in the queer community don't even quite understand our own experiences, and it gets disregarded a lot. Or bisexuals also get kind of denied a lot of their queerness because it's like, you're not queer enough, you know? That's all that part of that internalized depression. And also, when it comes to the queer stuff, partly the in-group, the infighting, which is sometimes called horizontal oppression, where people within the group are saying, you're not good enough, which is something I want to mention because I see that a lot on like ADHD, like Reddit threads and stuff. I'll see that out there a lot with other ADHDers being like, well, I can arrive to places on time, so I don't know why other ADHDers can't. That's a form of like, okay, you have internalized the narrative that you should be on time, so you have internalized oppression, and now you are turning that against people who struggle with the thing that you feel you have defeated, right? And so it creates more of that, like, I'm more like aligned with what people want me to be. And other ADHDers just need to have to figure out, like, I succeeded. Why can't you? And you get that infighting. So then you don't feel very safe talking about your ADHD issues with other ADHDers.
And it completely disregards the fact that we struggle with these things. It's not weird that we struggle with time management. If we have ADHD, it would be weird if we didn't. These things are a part of our condition. And so it's this idea that we are wrong and should be different, or that we shouldn't need supports. Something I've noticed again and again in this community is that we have a hard time feeling proud of ourselves for our accomplishments. And I think that's often because of internalized ableism. We are comparing ourselves to people who are neurotypical or who don't have a disability and saying, well, I was able to accomplish this thing, but I needed this support that I shouldn't need.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I also think that we have a hard time defining what success looks like for us versus what society says that we should celebrate as success, right? We don't tend to pat ourselves on the back for like taking time to rest or taking time to have fun with our special interests and like just really, you know, saturating ourselves in the happy, joyful feelings we get from our special interest, right? Like we don't think of that as an accomplishment, even though it actually is, especially in a super hustle focused society that wants us to hustle even more because they want us to like not only hustle enough to keep up with neurotypicals, to hustle even more to be more successful, and don't even acknowledge how much work we're already doing, even though we're not even quite keeping up, you know? We don't think of it as an accomplishment to like just not shame ourselves for like taking time off, go into our special interest and resting, you know?
I was able to accomplish this thing, but it doesn't count because like it's not enough. It's not as good as, it's not as fast as, it's not as soon as this other person, right? We compare ourselves to other people. It's kind of human nature to compare ourselves to other people. And when we do that, and most people are neurotypical, it's really easy to judge ourselves. Like, we aren't as good as this other person. I'm not as good of a friend because they remembered my birthday and I didn't remember theirs. I'm not a good employee because I struggle with being to work on time. And so even if we accomplish really amazing things, even if when we show up to the meeting, we come up with really great ideas, it's really hard to feel proud of ourselves for those ideas. It's really hard for us to feel proud of our accomplishments because there's this caveat of, yeah, but I was late.
Which I think is what I was getting at in terms of like what actually are our accomplishments. And I think a lot of that comes from like, I know at jobs and stuff that I've had where it's like, here's your weaknesses. It's like the list of the stuff that you struggle with is like, because it's considered basic and because it's considered, you know, normal to not have to struggle with being late all the time or whatever, right? That it makes us, quite frankly, we get kind of infantilized by our bosses. You know what I mean? People just automatically think like, you should be able to do this. It's like, yeah, you have good ideas. Yeah, you're really knowledgeable. Yeah, you're really good with the students, you know, for speech language pathologists, right? Like, yes, you have great rapport. Yes, you get great results. Your progress is wonderful. And you're on time with all your legal paperwork and your billing and all these things that really require a hard deadline, but you still don't show up completely on time. So, right? Like, we get kind of taught like that does eliminate that. And it's like, it shouldn't. It seems really weird that that actually eliminates all those other good things we do. But that's the systemic ableism. And then I think, yeah, we do turn that into ourselves because that is such a consistent narrative that it's only natural for us, even from like really young, to learn that if we're not perfect, we're not good enough. That's it. You know, accomplishments don't matter if you can't be perfect at them, basically. That's kind of what we get.
And then if we manage to be able to do something that we would normally be proud of, and there's no caveats, right? Like, we accomplished this amazing thing and we did it ourselves and we did it on time. Then there's well, that's not enough, right? It's not enough that I was able to accomplish this because look how messy my car is. It wasn't enough that I did this thing because it wasn't enough to make up for the areas in which I struggle. It's not enough that I got an A in this class because I got a C in this other class where I struggle. So we either feel like we're not accomplishing what we should be accomplishing, we feel like we are accomplishing it, but it doesn't count because of the supports that we needed to get there, or we're like, yeah, okay, I did it myself. I did accomplish that thing. But that's not enough because look at all of the areas in which I struggle. I did throw my friend an amazing party, but that's not enough because then I forgot to text her last night, right? So this internalized ableism gets in the way of us being able to feel proud of things that we have genuinely accomplished. But maybe even more insidious, it also gets in the way of us actually accomplishing things because if we believe that we are somehow bad or wrong or broken, if we admit that we struggle with a thing, we might not admit that we struggle with a thing. We might not seek the support that we need to not struggle with a thing.
Yeah. And even if you're not seeking for support, just the sheer amount of mental effort that happens in our heads when we're just funneling around this narrative in our head of like, well, I should be doing this, or, oh, you know, I can't focus, but I should be studying. I should be doing this. I should be doing that. The amount of mental effort, the amount of mental space that takes up, the amount of energy we burn doing that, even if you're not seeking actual external support, it's still just an absolutely ridiculous amount. You know, I think this is also why a lot of times I know a lot of cis women and people raised as women, being agender myself, we get late diagnosed and we get diagnosed with anxiety first because a lot of this sounds like anxiety, right? I should be this, I should be that. I'm not good enough for this. I'm not good enough for that. Oh, something's bad is going to happen if I don't do this. If I show up late, it's something really bad is going to happen. And it seems like anxiety, but the truth is it's learned from experiences where that did happen, right? And this stuff is real. Like this internalized ableism, this is a real message we get from people. I still get it at this age. I'll still get it from people where it's like, you should be better by now. You're 46 and you still can't blah, 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 blah. You know, you still can't figure out how to show up on time, which is also kind of side note funny because perimenopause makes the time blindness so much worse. Holy crap buckets. Seriously, so much worse. Anyway, so it's like it's like a lose-lose kind of thing. And it's like it's not just the ableism. I think it is just like literally a learned pattern of when I fail to do XYZ, bad things happen. And then, yeah, we do develop some very justified and valid anxiety around that, you know? And that burns through so much energy. And it's not too surprising that a lot of us hit this giant burnout wall at certain points in our lives. Like, you just can't keep burning up that energy infinitely, you know?
Community college, intending to go to a 4-year university, and I ended up dropping out. I was a gifted student, and I should have been able to do it myself. I shouldn't have needed the accommodations, so I didn't go to disability services. I didn't ask for accommodations because I didn't think I should need them. I thought I should be able to do this myself, and so I didn't. I dropped out of college, and I still regret that. I would have loved to have a college degree. That was very important to me, and I think so often there are things that are very important to us to accomplish, to ourselves, for our families, that we don't because we can't admit to ourselves or to other people that we struggle. That's internalized ableism too.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, for me, it's a PhD. I walked away from that program. Would love to have finished it. Maybe I'll go back at some point. I think there is that like thinking you shouldn't need the support. There's also the like lack of knowing we could get support, especially in ADHD world. I think it's still also prevalent with even some psychiatrists and some specialists that like you can get over ADHD. You can totally get over this. Yeah, you just have to do these things constantly. You need strategies 100% of the time. And then, yeah, you can get over it and you can just like stop being ADHD, which is not true. But I do think that narrative is out there so prevalently that there are ADHDers who don't even think to ask, you know? I do really feel like, especially autistic community, it's not perfect by any means, but I do think autistic discourse online, there are spaces, there's plenty of very ableist spaces, but there are spaces where people recognize ableism and call it out for what it is. And I think a lot of ADHDers that I've seen anyway, especially women or non-binary people, ADHDers, like, we just internalize it. We internalize so many messages and we don't recognize it for actual systemic ableism, because there is that aspect of I didn't ask for help, but there's also the aspect of like, for me, going back to academia means potentially entering a system where even if I have supports and I go to the disability office and I sign up for it and technically I should have legal protections, the reality is those legal protections are minimal and the power differential is big enough between students and professors that if a professor wants to, they can still deny me things. They can still deny me accommodations that I explicitly ask for by just saying, no, I don't do that for any students, so you don't get that either, you know, which is kind of insane. And it's nutty when you think about it. But I see it with like also school kids who even have like individualized education plans in the United States. Those will say like legally you have to give them these accommodations. And there are students who like do the most bare minimum to try to give some level of accommodation. And that's only after staff members like myself or their case manager or something actually explicitly go to that teacher and are like, legally, you have to give them this. Like, it is such a struggle to break through the actual ableism too, in terms of getting the help. And so there are, I think, times where people have asked for the help, where they've tried to express, they've tried to advocate for themselves, and it gets denied a lot. And I think that does, yes, it turns into internalized ableism, but also it's the explicit ableism. It's actual systemic ableism and bias and stigma that like create these huge barriers that we just keep bumping up against. But that I do think it just seems to me, this might just be, I don't know. Let me know in the comments below if you agree or not. But it just seems to me in ADHD spaces online and with ADHDers I know in person, a lot of them internalize, particularly for women or for non-binary, for queer ADHDers out there. They really internalize every barrier as I didn't do something right, when in reality, what they're describing to me is like, the system failed you. That was explicit bias. That was explicit discrimination. And in fact, when I've been at jobs where like trying to ask for a reasonable accommodation was completely denied, I actually did look into legal battles for like discrimination over things like that. And no ADHDer, as far as I know, I'm not a lawyer, so if I'm wrong, once again, correct me in the comments below if I'm not wrong. But from when I looked at it, anytime an ADHDer tried to bring a lawsuit of discrimination against their employer, it was denied because the workplace expectations are so anti-ADHD and yet so normalized that the judge would agree with the employer that the ADHDer should have figured out how to do everything right by the employer standards. So I do think, yes, it's internalized, but there's also so much systemic ableism. There's so much overt systemic ableism out there against ADHDers and what we need, and everyone's interpretation around us being lazy and stuff. That's like a whole different issue. And I think if we keep thinking of it as always being an internalized barrier, that actually can almost become its own like cyclical internalized ableism of like, every time I hit a barrier, I guess I didn't advocate hard enough, or I didn't request the accommodation correctly, or, oh, I should have just gone to the disability office and that would have fixed the problem. It might not have. That's the actual reality, is those professors could still deny you, unfortunately. They really could, even though they shouldn't be able to. They actually can. And so it's like, we shouldn't have to be perfect with our advocacy in order to get our needs met either.
And there's a real cost to this, not just in terms of the pride we don't get to feel, not just in terms of the things that we don't get to accomplish, but also in terms of all of the cost to ourselves, to our relationships, to our physical well-being when we refuse the supports that we need and we try to accomplish things without those supports in place, and to our emotional health, to our relationships with other people, because we overpromise and underdeliver.
The overpromise, underdeliver, I think internalized ableism can definitely lead to that. But honestly, I think that's a learned behavior from, once again, explicit ableism. I think it's actually more of an explicit ableism thing, in my opinion. I don't know. This is just my opinion, and I might be getting a little too much on a soapbox here, and I might get a little heated when I talk about it. I might get a little sassy. But I've been having that experience even as a 46-year-old where somebody wants me to promise to never do something. You need to promise to always be on time. And I will always qualify because I'm like, I can't really promise that. I will do my best to do so, but I genuinely can't promise that. And then that gets interpreted, my qualifying it, my unwillingness to promise is interpreted as me not taking accountability for my actions, as me refusing to take accountability. When in what I'm actually trying to do is be honest and upfront and advocate, right? And I'm trying to basically say, like, I'm not going to make a promise I have to break. Like, I'm old enough to know I can't promise that. And that is an unreasonable expectation for me to promise for myself. And then the kickback I get from that is a lot of very explicit ableism around, well, you're just not taking responsibility for your actions. You're just not taking accountability. So it's sort of, once again, in my opinion, kind of this lose-lose of like, if you do learn to stand up for yourself, you often get even more pushback that's a lot more explicit of that person judging you and saying you should be able to fix that. You still get that pushback. You know what I mean? It's similar to like how I had this conversation the other day with a friend where it's like, if I'm chunking out a cleaning task and I leave it kind of half done, people see it as like, you were lazy, you never finished what you started, you get all of these messages. But then I'll be like, well, I'm using a strategy. I'm chunking out that cleaning task. Because I was getting distracted, but if I leave it in that state, I'll remember to finish it when I go back. But like, I've got to chunk it out. Otherwise it'll never get done at all. I'll just delay starting it. And then that gets interpreted as me not taking responsibility or not doing it the right way. And it's like, and people saying like, well, you just need a different strategy then because they don't like the strategy I'm using. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's like, it gets really muddy once you get into the internalized ableism and what you're telling yourself and then also what you hear from other people. Things start to get really muddy and really messy. You know what I mean? Trying to unpack what is explicit ableism and what is internalized ableism. And if you're trying to unpack your internalized ableism, then trying to accommodate yourself and stand up for yourself. And then getting met with more external ableism, like that more explicit ableism. It's really hard.
We can sometimes end up being workaholics because we are pouring so much of ourselves into our work because we don't feel like it's ever enough. We can end up with anxiety and panic attacks and burnout and depression, self-deprecation. The negative thoughts, the negative judgments we levy against ourselves on a regular basis have a real cost to ourselves. We end up choosing people who agree with us that we are garbage because we think that about ourselves. We think we are not enough. And so we might choose partners who agree with that.
Yeah, that's actually, it's interesting. I just saw, I saved a quote on this somewhere, but somebody was basically talking about how this really makes ADHDers, but also like autistics and other neurodivergents, especially for those of us who like internalize shame around who we are and have this internalized shame and this internalized ableism narrative around like we're not good enough or we're not whatever. It really makes us very vulnerable to like love bombing from like people with narcissistic personality disorders and people who are just in general toxic. Maybe they aren't narcissistic, but they're toxic. Or they're abusive, they're bullies. It like makes us really susceptible to that. And it also makes us susceptible to people who want to like save us from ourselves, right? Like, so people who aren't really loving us for us, people who just want to see us become what they think we should be, you know? And so that is a very good point, that constantly being told you're always wrong definitely makes you a lot more vulnerable to personality types and people who really love telling people that they're wrong and that they can help them be correct, you know? Someone who wants more control over another person and wants to help them be right. It makes us really vulnerable to that.
And the cost is not just to ourselves. The cost is also to the world, because the things that we could offer the world, if we weren't so discouraged because nothing we do is ever enough, or if we were able to say, hey, I do struggle with this, these are the supports that I need, the things that we could contribute to the world, those things are lost if internalized ableism is getting in the way. If we are so discouraged by our failures that we can't appreciate our successes and we quit, or if we don't achieve these successes at all because we don't have the support that we need to achieve them, the world loses too.
I do want to say, when it comes to the cost of the world, I 100% agree. One thing I'm struggling with right now is the fact that, like, I mean, as a speech language pathologist, I wish it were true, but the right words don't always change people's minds. And the words I say does not give me control to change people's values in terms of whether or not they value ADHDers, right? It doesn't necessarily stop all of that stuff, even in close interpersonal relationships. It doesn't stop it. And I hate that that's true. I want it to be true, that the words I say matter and that it would change somebody's mind and that they would start to unpack their own ableism toward me, for example. I would love that, but that's not really the reality. And so because of this like social hierarchy, like sort of implied power differential between the non-ADHDer or the neurotypical and me, you know? It is also honestly a part for me, whether it's, I don't know if it's the internalized ableism or what, but it's an important part, I think, in understanding like the things I can't control and what things are my own self-shame that comes from that internalized ableism narrative and combating that for my own mental health. But then also understanding that, like, just because I bring amazing things doesn't mean people are going to want to hear it from someone with my brain. They might not let me self-accommodate, and they might not provide any accommodations, even if I ask for it. And I might be the greatest person in that position they've ever seen, you know, maybe. I mean, unlikely, but let's say I am, right? That won't matter if that person with the power doesn't value it. If they don't value what I bring that's so good and amazing, they're not going to let me bring it, unfortunately. And I think that that's also a very difficult thing when it comes to just the world and existing in the world as someone who is seen as less than, you know? And so I don't know what to do with that, because what that tends to bring up in me is, instead of self-shame, I feel a lot of anger when it happens. I feel angry that like people won't just give us reasonable accommodations and let us do what we do, you know, and that people won't see our value, and that you can't convince someone of your value if they automatically see themselves as better than you. You're not in a position to convince them, unfortunately, which really, really, really sucks. And it really ticks me off. Once again, it's like, yes, it's internalized, but also there is an explicit ableism piece to this that, like, even if you unpack the internalized ableism, you're still going to face the actual explicit situations of other people still not valuing what you bring to the table, which is so sad, and it makes me so angry, but it's true, unfortunately.
Passed on from generation to generation. If our children hear us saying these things about ourselves, what are they going to think when they struggle with the same things that we do? There is such a high cost to this.
And that's also true with intersectionalities, right? So like if you know, I mean, how many of us have heard our moms talk about their body weight or the way they look, or, oh, I don't have my makeup on, I look terrible today, right? Like, how many of us heard that stuff growing up? Or, oh, I can't eat that ice cream because I'm too fat, I can't do it. You know, how many of us heard that growing up from our moms, which is like an internalized sexism thing, right? So it's like, this is where also it's important to understand with internalized ableism, all your internalized oppressions from any intersectionalities you have also play a role in that too, right? So like I see it on ADHD women, I think is the subreddit, where like there's a lot of people pleasing there. I don't know if there's as much people pleasing with men with ADHD. I don't know, because maybe they're not expected to people please as much as men. So they have more of a toxic masculinity thing possibly going on with their ADHD versus a woman who might have more of that internalized misogyny or sexism of, I fail at being a mom because I can't keep up with my child's schedules, or I can't declutter their toys, or I can't cook dinner after a long day, or, well, you know, I don't have the energy for all of this. Like, and they start to feel that guilt for that too. So that is another aspect of internalized ableism that has to be unpacked, is like all the different intersectionalities and all the different ways society has told you you're not enough. And that is the rabbit hole that this leads down when you start to unpack more of this internalized messaging, and also the explicit stated messaging out in society is like such a rabbit hole. And it's so hard to, like, I don't know if it's a rabbit hole or if it's like a wormhole and there is no end to it. If you just keep going down and down and down into an abyss, I don't know, because I don't think I've hit the end of it myself either.
But one of the things that can really help is, rather than compare yourselves to other people, compare yourself to you. Is this good for you? And that was one of the first things that I started saying to combat my own internalized ableism. When somebody said something that kind of reinforced that belief that, like, what I'm doing isn't enough, I started saying things like, this is good for me. This is an improvement for me. This is personal growth for me. This is an area in which I struggle. And this amount that I did is something that I can be proud of, because for me, it's an improvement. Like, this is good for me. This was hard for me. And letting go of the shoulds, just watching. Anytime you hear a should, oh, I should know better. I should do this. I should be able to do this. I shouldn't need. That's often a cue. Like, there's some internalized ableism there. And so just challenging that.
Yeah. I really like that. I mean, that is 100% true. The like narrative of like comparing yourself to you is really important. I think also learning for myself, like, what do I value versus what does society say I should value, right? And when it comes to cleanliness, like, yeah, I value some level of cleanliness. I don't want infestations or anything, right? Like, I don't want, you know, threats to hygiene and health safety. But at the same time being like, is this a threat to that though? You know, right? Like, can that wait like one more day? Is it going to be a horrible thing? Are pests just going to move in literally overnight if I don't, put that one dish in the dishwasher? It's like more unlikely, right? So it's like, okay. But that's also getting along with like self-compassion, having more self-compassion, knowing what you personally value. And also another really big thing I've been doing lately is when I think I should be doing this, like I should be doing the dishes, I should be going to bed earlier, I should be doing this or that, I think to myself, I'm probably not, because I need to do something else. You know what I mean? I'm not doing the should because maybe I have a need. So instead of a should, think of a need, you know? It's like, you should do this, but like, actually, I need rest, or I need to do a little more special interest, like, because it's relaxing and restful for me and restorative, right? I need to take more of a break, or my brain needs to stop obsessing over that thing, you know? right? Or I need to rest for a little bit because I just finished walking the dog and it was a fast, long, hot walk and I'm exhausted and I'm uncomfortable. So instead of I should be taking out the trash, I need to sit a little bit and cool off and like rest, and then I can take out the trash. You know what I mean? So maybe that's a good way to think of it too, is like catching yourself from saying the I shoulds and thinking, what do I actually need though? Because I probably have a need. That's probably why I'm not able to do the thing, you know? And the need could even be, maybe I need to not value that so much. Maybe that thing I keep saying is the most important thing in the world. Maybe it's not the most important thing in the world. Maybe I'm not a horrible person if I don't do that thing. So, and this gets into, I have to do this where I have to trick my brain. This is like an affirmation thing, I guess, kind of, but it's like, I have to trick my brain with things that are empirically true and like kind of goofy weird for me to say. And it kind of helps me stop a shame spiral for myself. So one of the things I have is my personal shame scale of 1 to Jeffrey Dahmer, which is a very fast ramping scale, if you notice. Just 1 to Jeffrey Dahmer. So if I'm running late to like a brunch with a friend and I text and I say like, hey, I'm running a little bit behind, be there soon or whatever, I could go down a giant shame spiral, or I could say to myself, on a scale of 1 to Jeffrey Dahmer, how bad is it that I'm like 15 minutes late to this brunch? You know, compared to Jeffrey Dahmer, not so bad, actually. And then it like kind of, it snaps me out of that shame spiral, you know? So instead of I should have been on time, it's more like, well, I wasn't. So number 1, can't change the fact. And number 2, how bad of a person am I for running 15 minutes behind? I'm not Jeffrey Dahmer bad. All right, you know, like, it's not the worst thing in the world, you know? And 9 times out of 10 at my age, I've let everybody know when it's like a casual, like friendly meeting, yeah, I will try to get there within this amount of time. I give like a time window of like, I will try to get there within that time window.
I should be able to keep my house clean by myself. Have I ever been able in my entire life to be able to keep my house clean by myself?
That's a no for me, dog. Absolutely not. Truth.
Have I ever not needed help with that? No? Okay, then that should is a lie. Like, it's just not true. Yeah. This is an area where I struggle. It's an area where I'm going to need help, and that's okay. All right, I'm going to get off my soapbox. I really want to hear from you. I really want to start a conversation about this.
I'm super happy that a really big channel is like wanting to start a big conversation about this, but when you get into internalized ableism holding you back, you get into the ableism spiral, the internalized ableism spiral, you get into your intersectionalities of internalized depression and the narratives in your head. And then you also start bumping up against more explicit ableism of people who just genuinely want to deny, like, you're using a strategy, but that strategy is not good enough, so you should do better, you know? And so it is quite a rabbit hole to go down, but I am really, really grateful that a really big ADHD influencer out there and an educator is putting this out there, because I really do think the ADHD community is a little behind in it. I think that the internalized ableism has been so strong with ADHDers, even, you know, partly from like books and like the research narrative, but also from like the narrative of like, oh, ADHD is something you recover from, and as an adult, you never have it. Like, you know, like there was just so much embedded, like incorrect things, incorrect assumptions in like research. And it's still there with certain psychiatrists, certain professionals still have those sort of opinions. And there's just such a core misunderstanding. And I don't know if it's because ADHDers always just seem like just a little bit quirky and a little bit off. And so our internal reality and our internal world is so often not acknowledged and even discredited by people so harshly that maybe that's why. But it's very hard, I think, for myself, but also other ADHDers I see online. Sometimes it's really hard to realize that what we're actually dealing with is actual systemic ableism and not necessarily just something for us individually to solve. And I do think that piece does absolutely have to be unpacked, along with the internalized shame that comes from the internalized oppression and the internalized messages we hold. And also the intersectionality, because I do think there's a huge difference, especially when you're thinking of like cisgendered people and heteronormativity. There's such a huge difference, I think, between expectations of what like the ADHD woman should be able to do as an adult in her house versus like the ADHD man in those type of relationships. Like there can just be such a stark difference there. And then the messaging around the ADHD gets internalized in very different ways, I think. So I'm excited to see where the conversation goes, and I'm excited to see like what people bring up, and I'm excited to learn more, honestly. In the meantime, though, I hope you guys all have a great week or two, or however long it will be before I get a video up. You see how I don't make promises about putting up videos on specific days at specific times, because that would be a lie. I would break that promise every time. So that's a promise I don't make. I accommodate myself that way, guys. So yeah, have a great week or two, or however long it will be. And I hope you all just keep it weird for the sake of developing a safer community with each other, using our weirdness power for good, of course, instead of for evil, when you want to use them for good. And yeah, and I can't say I'll see you next time. Every time I want to say that, it feels like a lie because I don't actually see you. So until next time, guys, bye.